Hey everyone, I'm the Drink Pro. It's the last BTAC I haven't tried, the Sazerac 18-year Rye. What's up everybody, Drink Pro Kyle here with you yet again. Thank you so much for watching, subscribing, clicking the bell, joining the Patreon. Anything you can do to support the channel is always appreciated. Today I'm really excited to try the last whiskey in the BTAC series that I've not yet tried. For those of you who don't know, BTAC is short for Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. And every year Buffalo Trace Distillery releases 5 whiskeys that are sort of quintessential pours of different lineups that are released from Buffalo Trace. There's a William LaRue Weller, which is a wheated mash bill. They have the George T. Stagg, which is a very high proof bourbon typically. They have 2 different ryes. They have a Thomas H. Handy rye and the Sazerac 18 rye. And finally they have the oldest expression, almost, of the Eagle Rare that they release, a 17-year-old Eagle Rare. Now there is the Double Eagle Very Rare that I believe is also released once a year, maybe less often, I'm not certain off the top of my head, but I believe it's once a year. The Double Eagle Very Rare is sort of separate from the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. So far in all my videos, I've had the 2019 version, I believe, of every one of the BTAC series. Today is a little different. I've got the 2015 Sazerac 18-year Rye. Now, I would love to do the 2019 Sazerac. If someone has a sample and can send it to me, that would be wonderful. I'd love to do that. But I'm kind of excited to be doing a different year here because there's a really interesting history about the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection's Sazerac edition specifically ending in 2015. Now, before I get into that, I do want to say thank you to the Naptown Bourbon Club. The Naptown Bourbon Club is a 501c3 nonprofit charitable organization. They do whiskey tasting events, they do barrel picks, and everything that they bring in revenue-wise goes to charity. Board members have been really generous with their time and with their samples. That's how I was able to get this sample today. They're not paying me any money to call them out. I just really want to celebrate the work that they're doing and appreciate them for providing a sample. So thanks so much, Naptown Bourbon Club. And back to the whiskey. The 2015 Sazerac 18 is really cool because it's the last year that Buffalo Trace was using tanked whiskey. Now, what does that mean? In 2005, Whiskey Advocate magazine gave the Sazerac 18-year Rye their Whiskey of the Year award. And Buffalo Trace at the time realized we have a ton of 18-year aged Sazerac sitting in wood, in our rick houses. Buffalo Trace said, we don't want this to change at all. If this was what people wanted, if this won Whiskey of the Year, we're gonna keep it that way, damn it. And so what they decided to do was take those whiskey out of the barrels and put it into a huge steel tank, 13,500 gallon steel tank. So for a couple of years there, they pulled from that 13,500 gallon steel tank. And then in 2008, they dropped it down into 3 separate 2,100 gallon tanks. And they continued to pull from those tanks up until 2015, the year of this Sazerac 18. This is the last remaining whiskey from those steel tanks. In 2016, Buffalo Trace started pulling yet again from their warehouse to find fresh barrels to dump for their Sazerac 18-year-old Rye. But at this time, it was still the tanked. It was the last of the tanked whiskey. So this Rye, although it was released in 2015, it was actually from 2006 dump date. Now, Sazerac 18 is coming in at 90 proof. That's 45% alcohol. And that's the lowest in the BTAC collection. 3 of the BTAC series, the William LaRue Weller, the George T. Stagg, and the Thomas H. Handy, are all barrel strength. And then the Eagle Rare is at 101%. 101 proof, not 101%. That is impossible. Anyway, so this is going to be an interesting experience because it's a very old whiskey. It's a rye, which is not usually my bailiwick, and it's a low proof. So there's a lot of things about this that may not set it up for me to really like it. That said, I'm gonna come into this with an open mind. I really want to, give it its best shot at succeeding. And I think it's always an advisable thing to do when you're drinking whiskey is drink it with an open mind. One of the things I've become really interested in lately is doing blind reviews and trying whiskeys without knowing what they are. There's a real value to that. And I think I'm gonna do that a lot more on my live streams in the near future because it's such a great way to find what you like and what you don't. I got my little Drink Pro glass here. There's not many of these left, actually. But I'll probably do another run in the future, but not for a while. Now, I will say I love the color of this. This is a beautiful whiskey. It's much less thin than I would anticipate something that's 90 proof being. The whiskey really sticks to the sides of the glass. It looks like an olive oil, like an extra virgin olive oil. It's thin, but Certainly oily, and that oily texture can be really wonderful in mouthfeel. A lot of times when whiskey tastes too much like water, or it feels rather too much like water, there's something missing and you can tell on the palate. It doesn't really have the best experience. The mouthfeel is wrong. That might not sound like something super important to a lot of people, but when you're really drinking whiskey, and back to back to back especially, the mouthfeel is a critical component to make you say, oh, this is something special. This stands out to me. Anything a whiskey can do to stand out is going to be a good thing. Usually. There are some that stand out for very bad reasons. So on the nose, this is very classic rye. You get a lot of rye grain. Ooh, it's almost overwhelming how much rye grain there is. It's a very sweet rye. It's honey. It's definitely honey grain, honey rye. I gotta say too, this smells a lot hotter than 90 proof. Like, putting my nose in here is kind of difficult. I'm getting a lot of burn, a lot of singed nose hairs. It's surprisingly strong and bright and alcohol forward on the nose. I get a hint of a creamy chocolate, but just a hint. It's very little. I guess I'm not that surprised. A lot of these ryes that I find anymore have a chocolate note. I'm wondering if that chocolate malted rye from Woodford Reserve tuned me into this chocolate rye flavor, and now I can't stop seeing it, because the chocolate malting process is really just about extra malting on a rye. I get cinnamon sticks on the nose, which is nice. I get a subtle herbal quality, which I really like. A lot of times rye for me is too herbal. It's too pungent. I don't like super earthy, super herbal whiskeys, and rye often suffers from being in that range. So I'm really happy to see this rye be a little bit sweeter, be a little bit more in the territory I typically enjoy on my palate. Now, I do think that will make this rye not for everyone, because people that are used to certain ryes, specifically it comes to mind is the Willett Family Estate Rye series, are nothing like this. They are a drastic departure from this kind of nose profile. I haven't tasted it yet, so I can't speak to the flavor, but I suspect that this will be quite different from something like a Willett Family Estate 4-year rye or 5-6-year rye. I'm starting to get some subtle vanilla notes in there now that I've given it a chance to breathe in the glass for a while. Ooh, and now I'm starting to pick up the age. I'm starting to get a little bit of maybe a toasted almond in there. Definitely getting some cedar wood, which is nice. But they're all very subtle. It's really interesting how subtle all these notes are. Typically I don't do this, but I may just take this whole pour to get more notes out of this glass. Yeah, putting more in the glass, I'm starting to get more of that sweet nuttiness. I would say like a toasted almond. And any oak in there is like a green oak. It's like a young, woody note, which is weird because it spent so much time in wood. I would expect the woody flavor to be more bogged down, deeper, richer. This is almost sharp in its woodiness, which is kind of fun. One of the things I need to really sit down and do is compare the different nuts, because I was just thinking about this. Hazelnut might actually be a good note for this, because hazelnut is a sweeter nut, but I don't know if I could pick that out of a lineup, so I may have to play around with that, and I need to play with my nuts to get more experience. I'm better than that, but maybe I'm not. I think the note in here, that's the herbal quality, is a eucalyptus. It's a very quiet, earthy eucalyptus note. It's almost like fresh dried eucalyptus that's been dried for so long it's almost lost its scent, but not quite, and you get really close to the leaves. Maybe that's not a relatable experience for some. It wasn't for me until my girlfriend started drying eucalyptus, but that's what I'm getting off the nose of this, subtly, in the background, behind the honey, behind the rye. I get a hint of blackberry and some lemon there as well. The berry notes and the sweet fruity notes are very, very, very subtle. They're just barely there. But it's something I almost have never seen on ryes, to see that kind of fruitiness. So it's really unique and worth mentioning, even though it's in such a small quantity because it's so unusual. I gotta talk about it. All right, I've preambled myself to death. Let's taste the 2015 Sazerac 18-year-old rye, the last of the tanked ryes from the 2005 award-winning batch. Oh. God, that's weird. On my initial taste, I got this interesting, I guess I would call it a sourness, and the woody note became very stale. It was like old, stale wood with this interesting sour component. And then after tasting it, I go back to the nose, and I get this really, really sour note. But it's a sourness that isn't citrus. It's not a lemon sourness. Oh, I'm trying to place it. Maybe like a sour cherry? but it doesn't have the sweetness at all. I mean, the nose had some sweetness initially, but once I tasted it, all that sweetness went away. The taste reverted my sinuses back to a more classic rye profile. And the sourness is really throwing me off. But see, the further away I get from that first taste, the more the nose reverts back to that sweetness and all those notes I gave you before. God, that's so interesting. The taste really changes from what I would expect based on the first nosing. Classic rye flavors, very grain forward on the initial tasting. And see, it gets from this honeyness into this like dry wood and this weird sourness. Oh man, what is that? It's almost like a kumquat. Like kumquats are pretty damn sour. And this has like a sour fruit note, but it doesn't taste spoiled, but it's got a sour fruit note. So it's like kumquat and old dry wood. It's like eating a kumquat on like a dry dock. It's like eating a kumquat on a deck that hasn't been properly treated and it's just drying and baking in the sun. It's like eating a kumquat at a lumber yard. It's like eating a kumquat at a decommissioned lumber yard where the wood's just been sitting out in the sun forever. The rye right away. Ooh, a little bit of the chocolate note. Rye immediately to chocolate, immediately to the wood. There's not much of a finish on this, honestly, and that could be because it's at 90 proof. You know, the finish may have been too oaked at an 18-year rye, so they might have proofed it down. And I know I've seen this done before. Elijah Craig 18 is a great example of a whiskey where they've clearly proofed it down to reduce that over-oaked quality and created something really spectacular. It's a great example of good master distilling work, where they have intentionally done these proof changes in ways that may not be, you know, every whiskey fanatic's dream. Not a lot of people like proving things down, but it makes sense if you're trying to make a good saleable product. Overall, I actually really like this product, but it kind of surprises me in its simplicity. Generally speaking, a lot of the BTAC stuff I've had is incredibly complex. It requires digging through, it requires all kinds of work. This has some very definite stages. You get the sweet honey and the rye grain. You get to this interesting transitionary period where you have this sour fruit and you have this deep dry wood. In between there's sort of a transition of maybe even some chocolate notes in the rye. And then you get into this long lingering rye spice on the finish along with that woody flavor. That's a much more traditional wood, a lot less of the dry, almost tannic wood into a more traditional wood flavor. So it's a good exploratory pour. It takes you on a journey, but it's not overly complicated. I actually like this a lot better than the Thomas H. Handy. I think the Thomas H. Handy fit more into that dark, earthy, herbal rye category. And to me, it's more woody, so I have this sweetness, a fruitiness, and a woodiness. Typically, I've only really found that kind of flavor profile in ryes that were finished. So I'm, hats off to the Sazerac 2015 18-year rye. Very good stuff. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me. Again, shout out to the Naptown Bourbon Club for the sample. I appreciate all the support. I have finished my sample. Makes me very sad, but I'm sure I can find something else to enjoy. You all keep drinking like professionals. Cheers.